Okay, so welcome everyone to our annual webinar. We've been doing this pretty much every year for the last few years. My name is Mark Holland. I'm a professor at Vancouver Island University and a founding principal at West Plan Consulting Group. I will be your MC today. I'll offer a few introductory thoughts and then hand it to my esteemed colleagues here who are working across many different sectors, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And everybody is looking for good folks to join them and work with them on projects. So this should be a pretty interesting and live and real conversation today. As we start, I just want to acknowledge that wherever we are here in BC, we're on the ancestral territories of some of its 200 or so First Nations, and we acknowledge that reality and our responsibilities in the face of that in an era of reconciliation. This webinar is being brought to you by the PIBC Academic Liaison Committee. So we're a subcommittee of the membership committee at the Planning Institute of BC, and we essentially get together every month. We have faculty members, we've got student members, and I want to shout out to Herman here, Herman Ocampo from UBC. He's my co-chair on that committee. And over the years, we've developed a whole program of better connecting students to students, students to the practitioners, everybody to faculty in the universities, and most importantly, the universities to each other. So this is quite exciting. And we have potentially a fifth accredited planning school coming in the next year or so in the University of Fraser Valley. They're going through the pre-accreditation grind. And that'll be another undergrad to add to our current several other undergrads and graduate programs. So a few of them may be able to join us. I did send the invite out to Sherry Enns, to Dr. Sherry Enns, in case some of them, in anticipation of joining us, could join us here. So welcome everyone. It's always exciting for all of us to be, certainly all of us who are in academia, really are deeply committed to all of you who are the next generation, and it is really fantastic to be able to connect you to each other and all of us to each other in this kind of process. And of course, this time of year, as we emerge slightly exhausted from Christmas and the launch of our January and all the energy that comes with that. Everyone's looking ahead because April will be here in moments, and then we're all looking for work after that. And that was sort of why we wanted to get this going. Our committee is going to offer several other webinars over the next couple of months. Each of the schools takes one and does one each year on various topics where students can present to each other of what their unique research areas are. But we wanted to kick this whole heading into spring off and this winter process off with getting you kind of mentally organized to start looking for jobs and having some sense of a map and how to go about it and some thoughts from folks and hearing about opportunities. So we've got four great planners. Each of them are going to offer, volunteered their time here, very grateful for them, and I'll introduce them as they come on. Each are going to offer 5 to 10 minutes of just some thoughts. No PowerPoint slides, folks. You all have lots of PowerPoint on your daily coefficient these days in school. So they'll offer some thoughts on sort of who they are and what their view is of hiring and getting a job, what they look for, what opportunities they know about, essentially unique to their community and what they're doing. A few thoughts, just an introductory framing for this. And today we're very privileged to have four folks, each representing different areas of practice in planning. When we look at the planning field in terms of jobs, careers, and where you go, there's really four sectors that most of us work in. The first one is, and by far the largest, is the public sector. And it's broken down into two groups that we would normally think of: local government, which is the one that most planners practice in and that most all of you would be thinking of when you think of a community planner or a city planner. There's also a lot of planning work at senior governments, provincial and federal governments. They tend to be in various ministries and departments and to be fairly topically focused. And you spend a lot of your time administering programs through that process. In the local government, you'll spend your time in one of two areas. And if you spend your career there, you'll live in both. The first one is long range planning. So this is what most of us study when we're in planning school. And that's the big policy topics: parks, land use, transportation, generally the ways we want to save the world. And then probably a lot more work is in the second stage of planning, which is we do our big plans, but we never do any due diligence on anything. We just come up with lots of great ideas on post-it notes. We do a small amount of analysis and research, and then we create the plans. Then parcel by parcel, we implement those plans through the private sector coming in with applications for housing. So we have some place to live, or employment centers and things. So that's current planning, where you're essentially dealing with applications, reviewing them, and going through the approvals process. This is the one which has by far gotten the most attention recently in the provincial government's approach to Bill 44 and others, and the challenges we have with approvals. So that's the public sector. Generally, people who survive in the public sector and do well for a career are very public interest oriented. To state the obvious, you're working on behalf of the public. It's a secure job. It's probably the best paid job in planning these days, with benefits and union dues, and retiring a good 10 years, probably earlier before many folks. The work environments are challenging. If you're ready to move and you can move around, you can climb the ladder in local government much faster now, your generation can, than probably any generation previous to it. So not a bad area to work. And we've got two great folks here today, both David Block and Emily Gray. Emily's from the Lower Mainland metro urban area, and David represents our lovely great Canadian North, heralding from Terrace. So he'll give you a sense of sort of the more rural, small town side of this. The second area you might practice is private sector. So this falls into generally two areas. One would be planning consulting. So we have Jill here today from Dialog, one of our leading planning and design firms in Western Canada. And I've had the privilege to work with Jill on a number of projects in the last couple of years. A great team. For any of you who come from a design or interested in design, Dialog's your team to talk with. They're definitely probably the leading team that integrates design with planning all across BC and other provinces. It's a really great team, and Jill leads a lot of that work. So planning consulting, generally you're doing a lot of long range planning. So this is, you're doing the OCPs and all the policy work and a lot of engagement, loads and loads of engagement with the communities. You're generally leading that work because a lot of governments don't have the staff to lead that work. And so they hire consulting firms, planning consulting firms to do the work. The other side is the one that Jeremy, our final panelist today, represents, and that's the real estate development sector. We're increasingly finding more and more planners in that field. That's where I work. And it's because in order to move development forward, you really need to understand how local government thinks. You need to understand the policy dynamic of debate and negotiation, politics, and engagement processes. So we're finding a lot more people like Jeremy. Jeremy's part of a whole wave of planners that are now increasingly focusing on building the city rather than just talking about it and planning the city. So he's part of definitely a cutting edge area. And I've had the privilege of knowing Jeremy for a few years, and he's absolutely a bright light of his generation in this area. So we're really grateful to have you here, Jeremy. If you want a job in the private sector, generally it's pretty high energy, pretty long hours. It's quite competitive. You have to compete for just about every job you get against all the other planning firms who are going for it. You need to be into innovations. You need to have an edge. You need to have something special. You need to be better than the other guys. And you get to lead a lot of interesting projects. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's for those who are comfortable with a lot of risk and a lot of hard work, but you also get a lot of benefits out of that. It's quite an interesting area. Our last two are nonprofit and academic. Now, these are not large areas. We see a reasonable amount of planners choosing a nonprofit career. Really, being a nonprofit is focusing on specific issues, and there's a host of them. They don't hire a lot of people because they're short of money. They probably pay the worst of all the fields you can work in. But you get a warm feeling at the end of every day knowing you're advocating for what you believe is right and helping change the world. Through that work, you'll also influence a lot of public and private sector planners who then go to you for topics, for issues and understanding the issues, and they may even bring you in on projects that are focused around your area of expertise. So if you really want to make the world a better place, you don't care about having a fat pension waiting for you in 30 years, and you want to go to bed at night knowing you're doing the good work, nonprofit sector is a really good suit for you. The final one is academic. This is very small. Many planning schools across the country have less than half a dozen tenured full-time faculty. In fact, some of them have few. The school I work in at Vancouver Island University is not tenure track. We have no tenure track people. So there's not very many jobs. It's highly competitive. I've known Ryland for a while. He's absolutely one of the sharp knives of his generation in this field. And it is a tough life as an academic, but you do get the chance to research, and there's very little chance to do good, deep research and engage in education outside of that sector. So if that's really what you're called to, is advancing the knowledge and the understanding of planning and its issues, you get a chance to do that and dig into all sorts of interesting, unique areas of the field. So you'll need to be able to move, maybe even between countries, to have a career there. But it's a great opportunity. The other side are the adjunct professors. So these are practitioners who are brought in to teach a course or a couple of courses. You certainly don't do it for the pay, having done a bunch of it. You don't do it for the pay, but it is a really great opportunity to give back, pay forward, and kind of mentally organize your practice. So it's great. In terms of jobs here, before we go to our panel, the competition for jobs is cyclical. You're all heading into the worst chapter of every year, and that's April, May. That's just brutal because you're all hitting the market all at the same time. There's only so many jobs. So if you don't get one of those first jobs, hang in there, because June, July, August, September, there's this constant steady wave of jobs coming available, and you just have to stick it out and you will land one. It's just an interesting challenge here at the beginning of the sort of spring, summer each year. Like I mentioned, if you're willing to move communities, that's great because David will have a job for you, and then Emily will have a job for you, and then Jeremy and Jill, and they all live in different places. So when you're first starting your career and want to get up to that sort of mid-level planning area, you'll need, you and your partner and or your family need to understand you're probably going to need to be moving around. If you're in the lower mainland, you've got a lot of jobs within an hour's drive, so maybe you can make that work. But certainly a lot of the grads from our school expect to be moving around between a lot of communities in their first 5 years. So it's interesting for all of you coming out of school. Most of our schools don't spend a lot of time teaching the actual technical skills of planning that are needed on your day one when you get a job. So you sometimes have to do a little bit of your own work and get prepped and get geared up for that work on your own. There aren't too many opportunities to learn, a lot of the basic core skills of planning right now in continuing education, but we're trying to bring more on through the profession that'll be available to you. So with that, let's get started. There's a little bit of an introduction to get folks kind of oriented to your career and what you're working at and how each of our folks on our panel are sort of set up. I think we'll start with Emily here in Delta. So thank you, Emily, for joining us. This is great. Emily is a planner. Delta is a fascinating community. It bridges from urban to rural. It has a lot of ALR, some big First Nations activities going on. Some of the biggest developments in First Nations are happening within Emily's community. And it has waterfront. It's got rivers. It's got every possible challenge that you can imagine, and it's a beautiful place. Delta is just a lovely part of BC and one of its warmest as well. So Emily's the manager of community planning. She gets to work across a very broad range of topics and projects for her career, and there are job opportunities in Delta, folks. So Emily, thank you for joining us. You got 5 or 10 minutes to just take it away.
Yeah, well, that was a great introduction. Thank you. Yeah, so I've been with Delta for just about 2 years now. And before that, I was with the city of Burnaby, working on their housing portfolio. And before that, with urban systems in the private sector. So what I like about Delta is exactly what Mark said, kind of that range of work. It's a big city in that it's in the lower mainland. And, we have about 120,000 people, but it's a small team. So I lead a team of five planners and one part-time planning assistant, and we get to work on a bit of everything. There's housing, there's agricultural, industrial, heritage. So that's what I really like about being in Delta. There's a lot of opportunities to move around. And I was asked kind of what I look for or any kind of pointers I would have for someone getting into the market in their first job, kind of in the planning sector. And I was thinking about this, and I have a posting open right now. It's, I think the first thing is take the when you're applying for the job, just do the application in the way that's requested. Take the qualifications seriously, fill out the questions. Like we ask if you're eligible for CIP membership. We ask for a certain number of years experience, depending on the level of experience we want in the position. And, be confident and be confident in your experience, but don't apply for something that's asking for 10 years experience if you're just coming in. The other thing I look for is a cover letter, and because this really helps kind of describe why you're applying for the job and why you want the job in Delta in particular. I really appreciate a bit of attention to detail too. I can't tell you how many times I'll read a cover letter and they've written the wrong position title in it. So just little things like that to look out for. So that's kind of the more technical side, but then, kind of once you're through the screening process, if you're at the interview stage, good attitude can go such a long ways, even if maybe you don't have quite the level of experience, but good attitude and energy and just kind of bringing positive energy in is a great contribution.
Yep.
And preparation. I think that's probably my number one thing is if you're
Thanks,
prepared
John.
for
Okay.
the interview, that's very impressive to us and that sticks.
Okay.
With municipalities, that looks like the STAR method often, which yeah, you can ask me later if you want more details on that, but it's a particular form of questioning. But yeah, just prepare for the interview with some experience that you have or examples of school projects you've worked on, and that comes across really positively.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. That was fabulous and concise. That's really great and really good advice. I think everyone, I'll just say on behalf of all the panelists, read your cover letter at least 5 times. The number of typos, the number of mix-ups, especially if you're applying for a few jobs, you're trying to get into pile A, not pile B. And as soon as we see typos, it's not much to you, but to the reviewer, it's like, oh, okay, lack of attention to detail, all sorts of things immediately pop into mind. So thanks, Emily. That's really fantastic. David, let's go up to the north. So I'm not sure how many of you have had the privilege of being up north, but Terrace is just it's a beautiful place. David is the Director of Development Services and the Approving Officer. So that's all for subdivisions and development services, all the approvals in current planning for the city of Terrace. He's got degrees from Simon Fraser University and from the city of Calgary. His master's degree with the city of Calgary. He's RPP. He's worked in the public and private sectors, broad range of work all across the nature of what it takes to build, plan, and build a city. It's just great to have that level of experience. He's been there. He's been up north for about 20 years, worked his way up, been involved in pretty much the great thing about being part of a small community for those of you who are thinking about your career is it's very different than a big city. When you work for a big city like Vancouver or one of the bigger cities, you're going to do one job for a long time. In fact, you can spend a good chunk of your career in one small section of a department. When you're David, you're doing everything, because in some cases you may be the only planner for a period of time, be one of only one or two, and that means anything related to planning down to business licenses, building inspection, all kinds of things are going to end up on your desk. So it's a really exciting way to build a very, very big toolkit in short order. And David has exactly done that. I think possibly many of you may know of David, and that's because of his incredible generosity of his time and his expertise to our profession. David is the past president of PIBC. He has spent years working with our PIBC board to advance it and grow it. And he's been working with the local government management association as well, which bridges over into subdivisions. He's got a real deep set of experience, and he's also looking for folks up north because it's a lot harder to attract people up north than it is in the lower mainland areas, other than housing's a little more affordable, but it's quite a challenge. So David, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll hand it to you.
Good day, everyone. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, thanks for those generous comments. Yeah, been in Terrace for 21 years, actually. Someone reminded me that January is my anniversary. It started in 2004 here after doing my master's at the University of Calgary in the EVDS program. So yeah, lots of experience in BC, lots of experience in a wide range of planning, as Mark mentioned. And when I came to Terrace, I was the only planner. I was a city planner position at the time that I took this job. We have a planning department now with four staff, and I'm the Director of Development Services, which means I have the joy of building inspection, not doing the inspections, but overseeing a department that includes building, business licensing, animal shelter, bylaw, community safety officers, and GIS mapping, as well as planning. So there's a wide range of activities in my department that interplay between all of those happens on a lot of things. So that's one of the things. I think the small city, I call ourselves small city, Mark, sorry, not rural and small town, but a city of about 13,000 in northern BC, in a beautiful part of the country. And encourage you students as you look, yeah, don't limit yourselves to the island or the lower mainland. Be ready to look at opportunities across this beautiful province, because you'll get a lot of different experience in some smaller centers. And like Emily said, even in places like Delta, which are in that GVRD or Metro Vancouver realm, but they're unique from some of the bigger cities in that area as well. So the work in my department, I think Mark touched on it. It's long range and current planning, but opportunities, have been as wide as I wanted to make them, especially when I was the only planner. And before housing really was a provincial topic, an issue of note. Probably 15 plus years ago, we did some work at the city to start talking about housing. And that was just because I had an opportunity to see that, yeah, this is a need to engage our community on and to start those conversations. But that's what I look for when I'm hiring too, is people that are willing and interested in doing a wide range of things. Definitely not that big city sort of departmentalization. Lots of opportunities and lots of capacity to allow people to grow and experience and challenge their own abilities. So yeah, look for people that some of those things we talked about. Review your cover letters. Don't apply to Delta and then apply to Terrace and have the two cover letters say Delta on them. And we catch those. Sometimes you just chuckle a bit and you understand what people looking for. Are you planners coming out of our program as young planners looking for your first jobs? It's tough. You're applying a lot of places. But the real meticulousness comes in resumes and cover letters, where it's not just one little gap like that, where it's multiple things you see through, and that really puts a negative first impression. And I think, like Emily also covered, really look at a resume just to see what are your skills, what are your experience, what's your education. But your cover letter is, why are you interested in this job? Why are you interested? That's your opportunity to express what you know about the community you're applying to, even in very short couple sentences, and then why that position in particular is of interest. When interviewing, hiring, most of the applicants we narrow down meet all the qualifications in the job description. So it's what's the more intangibles that we look for in how people respond to questions, and how I can sense what work you've done to actually try and understand not just this job and the job description, but the community you're coming to and some of the issues and challenges. And that doesn't take a lot of work, but go look at the websites, go look at some of the planning specific web pages, some of the projects and initiatives. So you at least have an understanding of some of the issues that the community you're applying for is tackling. And if you can present some of that when you respond to questions in an interview, that's really positive, because that shows that you've taken an interest, not just in a job, but in this place and this community and what the challenges are. Look beyond those, the basics. You've done a planning degree, you've had maybe a little bit of limited experience in something, to what you bring as far as, like Emily said, energy, willingness to get involved and do different things, but also showing some passions for some specific things. If your housing is really what you're interested, let me know when you're interviewed. If it's other aspects of community planning, even social planning parts of the role, because we cover a lot of things, heritage planning, where your passions are, because we have opportunities to address all of those things in different ways, and not just to do the current planning or just the long range planning, but how to weave in those interests and how to see you'll fit in the team, what strengths you'll bring to the team. And I'm always looking for hiring people that will bring something that adds some positives to the team that we already have, and that brings something different. And whether it's just perspective on your own life experience, and where you came from across this country, what university you went to, what programs you studied, what your thesis, your master's projects interests were. How do those fit into the team we have, and what you'll bring that might be some strengths that and are really a keen interest in areas of focus. We hired this year someone from Mark's university, from VIU. We have a planner with a bit of life experience, but a bit more mature student. Regor joined us. He brings some real interest in IT and AI, which is like, that stuff just flies over my head, and it's more scary than it is exciting at times. But having someone come to join us with some real understanding, interest, and can bring some insight into how those applications and these new technologies actually might fit into the work we do, is a little bit of, okay, we're not hiring someone for that. We're hiring a planner one to do the planner one job description. There's nothing in our job descriptions anywhere that talks about AI. But presenting yourself and what you're interested in, I think, is the kind of thing we look for. And try and get a bit of your personality out of the interview process, because that really helps me and my team figure out and get a sense of who we're interviewing, how they're going to fit in, and how they're going to be a good team member. I think we're usually pretty comfortable that everyone who's gone through an undergrad or a master's planning program is knowledgeable, smart, competent. But then it becomes a lot of these intangibles about which person is going to fit best, not just for the role and the job, but also with working with us as a team. A lot of the work we do, projects, are team projects. We have everybody on board. We're doing an OCP update, and everybody's playing a role in that. It's not a lot of consulting. There's some consulting involved, and there's tasks and projects, but it's also an opportunity for everyone, from our planner one to our senior planners. And unfortunately, right now, our real gap is we got a position for a planner 2 or 3, not for a planner 1. So I doubt we're going to have a City of Terrace position in May, but you never know. But yeah, we're always looking for that mix of how you can present yourself in an interview. With your knowledge comes through, your understanding of legislation and things you've learned in your programs, planning theory, those things come through, but then a little bit more about how you're going to show some passion for the job, and how you're going to bring your own interest to the job in a way that we can see you fit a team.
That's great, David. Thanks. I'll just echo some of the things that David has mentioned. When you're inside of an organization looking for some new people, you need some more. There's actually a lot of needs. So when you come from outside, it kind of appears like, oh, there's a seat here, here's the job, you're going to pop into the desk, and that's what you're going to do. In reality, they're looking at it's family, it's legacy, it's complicated, it's broad. And to David's comments, there's sometimes things that aren't even on really mentally your horizon until they show up in the interview. It's like, wow, that would be really good to have on side. So I just underscore that. A lot of the folks I hired for my firm over the years didn't, you're looking for a really smart person who's got a lot to bring to the table, not just the ability to do that simple job. So that's great. And speaking of that, and a very broad range of things underway, let's go to Jill here next. Had the privilege of working with Jill over the last couple of years. She's an award-winning landscape architect, urbanist, planner. Her experience covers the full scope of work, from visionary and sort of design thinking all the way through to policies, plans, and some of the grinding work of working on current planning work. She also does a lot of public engagement. This is not something we've mentioned yet, but it's something that's always around. And as I mentioned, the consultants are out there leading very complex and expensive projects to engage complicated projects. Jill and I were involved in a project where we had up to 24 freedom fighters with Canadian flags following us around meeting to meeting. We actually had the police involved in one of the meetings just to keep them. That's what it can be like out there sometimes. So Jill brings this broad range of experience and works with a really interesting multidisciplinary team at Dialog. So Jill, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. And my head is going to explode with all those nice comments. But yes, 15-minute cities is a trigger word for some of the communities in British Columbia. So, um, I'll talk a little bit about dialogue because it's a bit of a pivot from what we've been talking about, and then I'll highlight some of the key points that I think are really important that my colleagues have mentioned. So, as Mark indicated, we're a consulting company, we're interdisciplinary, so we have architecture, engineering, planning as our core practice, and it lends a different perspective to the types of work that we chase and how we think about urban planning and the role that it has. We're coming at it from both a design lens and then a city building lens. And Dialog as a company is a purpose-driven organization. So we're really looking to work on projects and with clients that are aligned with our goals of really making our communities and our environment better. And one of the key differences, I think, being in the private sector versus the public sector is the trade-off between breadth and depth. I think if you are working in the public sector, you get to have a really rich and deep understanding of the city and the complexities. And Emily talked about the opportunity to have different roles within the same city. And I think it gives you a really rich understanding of that community. As a consultant, we work in a lot of different communities. And so right now we're working all across British Columbia, and we kind of come in, get to know a slice of the community or a scope of the project really, really well, and then we leave. And so you don't necessarily get that same kind of richness of understanding, but the trade-off is you get to have, a really broad perspective of what other communities are doing and what works and what doesn't. When Dialog is hiring for planners, we don't always tend to post a role. So I think again, differently in the consulting world, you won't necessarily see a posting for urban planner #1. A lot of our staff come to us through networking opportunities. So if you are not engaged in networking, I would really encourage you to think about doing that, particularly if you're interested in the consulting world. That's a great way to meet people and get that sort of introduction to a consultant, a company, or an individual that's doing the hiring. I'm one of the partners at Dialog, and we really think about our urbanism team. So our urbanism team is landscape architects, urban designers, and planners, sort of across the practice. So that means that we're working on projects in BC, but we're also working in projects in Nova Scotia. I've got some projects in California, and then I've got some projects in Inuvik. So, and again, it's sort of not irrelevant, but our planners that are based in Vancouver could be working on a project in Nova Scotia and vice versa. So we tend to build our teams based on experience, passions of the people that are involved, and the needs of the project at the time. When we're hiring, one of the things that I think is also going to be a little bit different is I will ask for a portfolio. And so a lot of times planners say, wait a sec, I'm a planner. I don't know how to put a portfolio together. And so don't panic. The portfolio is less about, do you have works of great art in it, but it's really about understanding, do you know how to put a document together? Have you done physical planning work? Can you show us some examples? But if you've done policy work in your class, we also want to see that in your portfolio as well. And so a lot of times people are putting portfolios together in InDesign, but you can also use Canva. It's really just about kind of presenting yourself visually as well as through your written cover letter and CV. I will 100% amplify if there's a typo in that cover letter, it tends to go off to the side. So please proofread, have your friends proofread your CVs and your cover letters. Also, speaking of AI, we can generally tell if your cover letter was written by ChatGPT, particularly if you still leave in the ChatGPT suggests that, which I've seen in cover letters. So I would really encourage you to take the time to write that cover letter out. Shameless plug, if you are interested in AI and planning, I'm giving a talk at the CIP conference in July about the role of AI in planning, but particularly AI in job pursuits. We can still tell. So don't use your cover letter to write your don't use AI to write your cover letter. One of the things I think that we're really interested in, as Mark said, is that initiative and interest in innovation. So if you're coming to a consultant company, the pace is a little bit different. And so we really want to see that spark and that initiative and that sense of energy. And that's one of the key things. I think we can certainly teach you a lot of the planning skill sets that you're going to need. And as Mark indicated, there's not time to learn the full breadth of the scope of the planning profession in university. What is harder to teach is innovation and or initiative. And so that sense of urgency is something that I love to see, that spark of passion for the profession of planning when you come in for an interview or when we meet you. So yeah, if you are interested in Dialog, even if there's not a position, send us a resume, send us a portfolio. As I said, we don't always post. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It doesn't mean that we're not interested. And certainly if you kind of go through that first round of planning and don't find a role, I'll just circle back as kind of final thoughts on the public engagement scope. It is a huge piece of our ethos for planning. If you're going to work in a number of different communities, you really need to understand what makes those communities tick and what makes Terrace different than Courtenay and different than Delta and different than Kamloops. And the only way to really understand the community is to spend time in public engagement. And so we put a significant amount of emphasis on public and stakeholder engagement in our projects, whether the RFP asks for it or not, because we really think it's an important way to understand the community. And so if you're looking for ways to add some extra sparkle or some extra experience to your application, think about taking some of the courses through the International Association of Public Participation. That's sort of the gold standard for North American public engagement. And again, it's something that just may give you an extra edge as you're looking to apply for your first job.
Thanks, Jill. That's great. That's excellent. And we'll go to our final panelist here right now. So moving further into the private sector, into the, as Jill noted, they spend their organization Dialog while she's in planning. They've got a lot of architects, so they're actively designing and supervising the building of cities. And now we move to a development company that is actually the ones doing the building and grinding their way through the approvals and things like this. So Jeremy Paquin is the Senior Manager of Development at Orion Construction. He's responsible for leading a broad range of work. And the private sector of building cities is an incredibly complex, exciting, and stressful job. It is incredibly complex to do this, and Jeremy's thriving at this stuff. Essentially working at everything up to pre-construction, industrial, commercial, multifamily, master plan developments. This involves essentially working from due diligence through site planning, coordinating all the approvals with all levels of government on projects, and managing a whole tranche of design and engineering and technical consultants at every step. Jeremy's packed a lot of experience into the first 10 years of his career. He worked in affordable housing prior to this, and prior to that with the federal government on their very large land portfolio development initiatives and a lot of policy work for the feds on smart cities and things like that. I had the privilege of working with him through our VIU program and the MCP program, and he's currently a candidate heading into his professional exams very shortly to become a full PIBC member. Jeremy, over to you.
Great, thanks, Mark. Yeah, again, head exploding here. Appreciate all the kind words. So like Mark mentioned, I have experience in the public sector. I've done consulting, and I've also been in the private sector now for a few years. So I can speak to both sides of the coin here, with a particular emphasis on the upper levels of government, because I think they do differ a little bit in the hiring process from the municipal folks. So before I jump into that, though, I'll just give you a bit of a rundown on what I do, because I think it does vary quite a bit from what Jill does and what David and Emily do as well. So as a development manager, you are responsible for, well, I'll take it one step back further. So we're a design build firm. We're a construction company who work with developers, although we do some development on our own. So a developer will hire us to do things like the feasibility and site selection, get the land entitlements, get the permits, manage all the design consultants. And because we're a design build, that's the design side. And then the build side, we have a construction group that'll take the project through construction. So I work with residential developers, nonprofits, REITs, local developers as my clients, but my day-to-day work is generally spent with dealing with, the Emilys, Davids, and Jills. I've got lots of architects, engineers, and I'm always on the phone with planners and engineering staff at the municipalities. just before this, I was on a 2-hour review of a traffic impact assessment. And before that, I was on the phone talking about balconies and the need to extend balconies beyond a arbitrary line in a in a zoning bylaw. So we're always busy and we're always looking at something different here. So yeah, on the getting hired piece, on the public sector, particularly at the federal government, it's so important, like Emily mentioned, to respond to the actual requirements of the job posting. So I know, because I did some hiring at the federal government, if you can't adequately demonstrate how you meet every requirement, you will be pushed aside for someone who can, unfortunately. So you could be a far more competent planner or policy wonk, but if you can't demonstrate, particularly through the STAR method, which everyone teaches, then you may lose out to someone who, maybe wouldn't have done as good of a job in that job as you would have. So for instance, if you are only in school and you're coming out of your undergrad right now, and they ask you to show a year of project management experience, try to show a year of project management experience. Talk about the projects you managed in university. Talk about any volunteering work you've done. Stretch it, because it could be the difference between you getting the job and not getting the job. And if you think your cover letter is too long, it may not be for some of these public sector jobs. Like, you really want to be able to show everything so they can tick the box and they make it almost undeniable to give you an interview. You really demonstrated your competency, your skill level, and you've met all the requirements. So yeah, cover letters, it's been said, but yeah, the AI stuff is terrible. Please write your own cover letters, spend the time reviewing them, show a bit of your personality in them, and don't only show how you meet the job, but show that you understand the company and show that you can demonstrate a bit of a career progression. So if we're hiring you to be a development or project coordinator, I want to know that you want to be a project manager or a development manager, and that you want to work on particular types of projects, and that you understand those particular typologies. They're very different, doing an industrial job versus a residential job. So if you have a bit of experience with one or the other, or you want to get into one, mention that. Be detailed in that, so we get to know you a little bit. Like Jill mentioned, networking is super, super paramount for this. And getting in the door is so important, because once you're in the door, that's all that really matters. I've hired people based on a single one-on-one interview, and I've hired people after 3 or 4 long, it could be a super grueling process. So it's really just about getting yourself in front of the hiring manager and getting in the door. Unsolicited resumes work. We don't post our postings either, because when we post them, we might get 200 resumes. So we work with recruiters quite a bit. So I would say tap into the recruiter stream as well, because it might be really hard to get your first job, but once you get one, and I'm sure this is the same in the public sector, the recruiters just don't stop hitting you with new opportunities. So it's so important to get that first job and to get in front of the hiring manager. So a few things I could recommend. Cold emails and cold LinkedIn messages are fine, but again, with the cover letter, like, if you're not actually doing a bit of research on me or the company or the projects we're working on, or some of the issues of the day in a particular municipality, like, I'm probably not going to be super enthused to take half an hour out of my day to have a coffee or chat about your work to date and what you want to do in your career. People were really generous to me with their time, so I like to pass that on to folks as well. So just as a note, if anyone wants to reach out to me to chat about anything, feel free. But again, show a little bit of your personality, show you're interested, and show you took the time to think about this stuff, because I'm going to have to take the time as well. So yeah, don't just say, hi, I see you work at X. Can we talk about X? Like, I prefer not to. Get involved. The ULI, UDI, NAOP, PIBC, these are amazing organizations who really understand the communities that they work in. We're here because of PIBC. PIBC does the chapters all over the province are so important to get engaged with. ULI has been great for me. There's been so many mentorship opportunities and events to go meet people in my organization. And I would just really say that if you're in the public sector, you should be engaged in these groups as well, because it's a really good way of bridging the gap with your private sector colleagues. I love when I see some of my friends in public sector planning show up to these events, because it just gets them more engaged with what's going on the other side of the street, and understanding those development problems of the day. Again, you're coming out of university, either a master's or an undergrad, and you probably don't have a ton of experience, but I would say, build your resume, start a side hustle. Volunteering particularly is super, super important. Doesn't matter if it's political, if it's with nonprofits, just show that you're committed and you can commit to something, and you have interests. I think we love to see that. Like if you're volunteering at a mountain bike park, I think that's so interesting, and it shows that you have interests and you can dedicate your time to something. So yeah, lean into the interests. Don't look for a job in the private sector if you don't like being stressed and busy all the time. It's just the reality of it. I think Mark, I sent you an email this morning at 5:01 about this today. So some days are like that. Some days are a little easier. But some days and some weeks and months will definitely be like that, and they'll grind you down. But if you love it, and I do love it, then that's all that really matters. But yeah, so when I hire people, I really want to see that they have that work ethic and that commitment to growth in the job and to seeing projects through. So we don't need to hire someone who's perfect on day one, but they don't have to come in and crush it on day one. But we need to know they're a good fit for the team. So really demonstrate that. The first coordinator I hired, we hired him more on personality than existing skill set. It took a few months for their competencies to catch up to their personality, but now a year and a half later, we've promoted them, and they know the job, and they're a perfect fit for the team. So that's super important to us. We work closely as a small group at some of these organizations, so you have to like the people you're working with. And I'm going to see you 8 hours a day. I want to know that we can be friends and go for a coffee or a beer if that's what we're doing. If we hire you, we're investing our time and money in you. So we really need to know that you can become a productive member of the team, because we're going to see hundreds of resumes come in, and it's like Mark said, it's pretty dog eat dog out here, unfortunately. But some people are super well suited to that. That said, getting into development a couple of years ago wasn't too challenging. You may have seen housing starts and construction stats as of late. They're not doing so hot. So, interest rates have risen, immigration has slowed, people's pocketbooks are a little tighter. There's a trade war coming. So it will be harder for you to get into development now than it was in the past. So you may have to do more and go the extra mile to get in. So I would just say, send everyone an unsolicited LinkedIn message, an unsolicited resume, and that's kind of all you can do. And if you see a posting, make sure that you are really tailoring your response to that posting with some knowledge about the company. And again, be willing to go where the work is. If you have to go to Terrace, that's awesome. You'll get so much experience in Terrace, because a lot of the smaller northern and rural communities, they don't have the planning staff that some of the lower mainland and island cities do. So it may be the best thing that ever happened to you in your career. You may get way more responsibility, and you may get a chance to kind of touch a lot of different files, as opposed to going to work at a larger city like maybe Vancouver or Burnaby, where you're going to be really good at one thing and maybe even only in one neighborhood. So yeah, by all means, travel for the work is. And to Jill's comment, I love when people do send us a portfolio as well. Like it's so cool to see the projects you worked on in university. If you're an architect or an urban planner, that's so valuable to us. It shows your eye for design. It shows you can put together a portfolio, manage your thoughts and show maybe even a narrative through that. So that's super important to us as well. And yeah, again, reach out to me anytime if you want to chat through what the next phase or the first phase of your career looks like. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremy. Fantastic. That's great. Yeah, Jeremy's comment is a good one. Right now, we're going through a little bit of a dip yeah, municipalities are hiring, but the development industry is pausing. In fact, I spent time on the call yesterday with a super experienced senior development, almost VP level, who just got let go because the interest rates and everything is just paused. There's everyone's in a holding pattern waiting for things to kick up again. When it does, it's going to be busy. So definitely stay involved. We're about to head into, in just a couple of minutes, we're going to head into Q&A. So think up a question or a comment or something like that. We're going to run two things parallel. You can type questions and comments into the chat. I've got it open here. Or you can put your hand up in the participants, and I'll try and alternate our way through those. We'll have our four panelists chat. We've got another half an hour or so. But just before we get started the 13 things, just to preempt some questions, the 13 things you need to do to get a job. First off is getting a job is a job. Take it seriously. It's not something you just do off the side of your back. This is a serious piece of work and you earn that job. So that's the first thing. Secondly, go find where the jobs are listed. We talked to a couple of folks here where they aren't. So actually choose companies, organizations, groups that they may not have a job listed. That doesn't mean there isn't something that might be available. So start doing research there. Get onto the lists of where all the planning jobs are listed. So PIBC puts out those regularly. You can get onto their list. Civic Info, absolutely. Every week or so, they just publish this tranche of jobs across BC on all sorts of areas. CIP has those. There's other organizations in planning that have them. Obviously, the online ones, LinkedIn is probably one of your top ones. Indeed, Monster, others. It's a job. Get out there, search, scope, dig in. Gather the jobs, the locations that you think you're very interested in. Sort of start organizing them and thinking about them. Take a look at your CV and the jobs that you've seen and start figuring out, how do I match my experience to those kinds of jobs? You'll start to see patterns emerge quite a bit fairly often. So take a look at your CV and start to think about how they match. Now, do not lie. You can be kind of a little bit optimistic, but do not lie, because in the interview, you'll be asked. And the minute there's a sense of distrust, of lack of truth, you're gone. Trust is a non-negotiable when we're starting to look for people. We need people with integrity. So don't lie. But I have a friend who got almost every job she applied for, because what she did was exactly that. She took the list of the jobs and then she wrote the very perfect resume, the absolutely perfect resume that would blow the job out, like absolutely be given the job. And then she set her resume next to it and started making only the changes she really needed to make. And it got her mind into how to frame it, because a job is a combination of skills and knowledge and experience. So if you don't actually have the job, the exact what they're asking for, you may actually have knowledge and experience and skills in related things, which can be reorganized as a new molecule that actually makes you viable to very quickly pick up on this thing, because we often know that there's going to be some training involved. If you don't draft a template cover letter, get your mind organized around that, and then start thinking about how you can reframe your position, and that showing passion, showing interest, and showing knowledge. Research every group and individual you're going to reach out to. Get on LinkedIn right away, senior planner, anybody, and look at the company website, look at the municipal website. What are the initiatives they have underway? Spend a bit of time, research them. If they're about to, basically bring you in as one of their core people, you need to spend some time. You're marrying them. They're marrying you. You need to kind of get to know each other a little bit. Spend some time on that one. And then the information interview. Like, as Jeremy said, we'll do it. It takes time out of our busy schedules, but people did it for us. And if there's somebody really good there and they're reaching out to us, hey, maybe there's a win here. There's something opportunity. So there is a big door open. Think of it as a 10-minute interview of them. They're not interviewing you. Everybody knows you're looking for a job, but that's not the conversation. You want to find out more about what they are, and then come back, customize your CV and your cover letter so that it's best fit. Then you can send it off to them, thank them for their time, etc. That begins to develop a sense of a relationship and that kind of a thing. Keep a list of all the people you're engaged with, certainly that caught your attention, and stay in touch. This is a relationship. David, over every one of us, but I'll just pick David because he's been in the business a long time. The list of people David knows is massive. And we're bumping into each other all the time and interacting on different platforms of common ground. So you're entering a family, a profession, and you're going to just need to start building that set of relationships. And then volunteer if you've got some time. Jeremy was so right about that. PIBC, ULI, some group, any group. and shows you're giving back, shows that you're committed. And then finally, the process is I help an entire generation of students, or a whole cohort of students every year get jobs. Your professors are probably your first reference points. So you need to perform well in your classes so that they notice you and will give you a good reference. But celebrate the no's. Every time you get a no, there's something to learn. But more importantly, that's one no out of the way on your way to yes. It's an old classic sales motivation technique, but it is so true when you're looking for a job. You didn't get this one? Great, move on. That one's out of the way. It never was yours. Move on to it. You're going to find yours yet. And as long as you're hanging on to something that may not be yours, you're not getting to the one that is. So keep going and just keep going. I work with students that some takes 4, 5, 6 months to get their first job, and they just keep going, keep your energy up, get some support around you, and keep moving. So there's 13 steps, just dumb pragmatic stuff on how to do this. So let's open this up for a conversation. We've got a half an hour now. So I've got a few questions that popped up in the chat box. So I'll start with those. But if you want to put your hand up too, then we'll kind of oscillate there back and forth, et cetera things. So question from our VIU studio there. When applicants respond using the STAR method, is there a part of the answer that you are listening for in particular? Like what is considered a complete answer? Now, I haven't used the STAR. Jeremy, you mentioned it. I don't know how many of the rest of you use the STAR system. So you don't all have to comment, but Jeremy, you want to pick the first things off, and let's see if anyone else wants to comment on it.
I think what is it? Task and then something and then results. I honestly can't remember it. It was such a big part of my life for so long, and now it's gone. I've forgotten it. What is it, Emily?
It's situation, task, action, result. And I know this now because I've been doing a bit of hiring recently. And the answer to the question for Delta, at least I would imagine it's similar for other municipalities, is all of it. We need situation, task, action, result. And I know for, like, typically in our interviews, we have the hiring manager, probably have my boss, the director, and someone from HR panel. And the HR person in particular will prompt if you don't provide the action part, or you don't provide the result, or you don't provide the situation. And it comes across better. You don't have to hit all of those every time without a prompt. The prompt is fine. You know, you get nervous, you forget things, like I didn't include that. But if you're prepared and you hit all 4 of those consistently without any prompts, that looks really impressive from the municipal side of things. Sorry, Jeremy, I'm not sure if that's the same for you guys. But.
Any other comments on STAR, or we can go pick up kind of something you said there, Emily? Jordan's wondering, like, who actually looks at your resumes and puts pile A and pile B together? Who's the first sort of set of eyes, and how does it progress from there through an entity?
I'll jump on this one, Mark. We have an HR manager who really just makes sure that the applicants meet the qualifications. I don't think the HR manager really reads cover letters to look for, other than to scan them and see if there's those errors. Get that sense of, and do a little bit of screening, because, unfortunately, lately we're not getting those 30, 40 applications for a job. There's a lot of competition in the planning world right now to try and hire people. But weeding out in the past has always been important because there's a lot to look at. The cover letters come more to myself, planning manager, depending which department we're hiring in, looking at what are you telling us about us as an organization, us as a department, and what your interests are, the personal stuff we talked about. Jill, Jeremy, Emily all mentioned that. We're trying to get a sense of understanding you, not just what your resume says your qualifications are. And I think that's where the HR role is. Are you checking all the boxes that say, yeah, you made it through that portal? We don't use that STAR method, but I think we have to ask a lot of questions that dig at those same things. Situation, task, actions, results. We ask interview questions that really draw out of you in a situation. How did you follow up? So some good prep there. Even if the method isn't being used, I think responding to questions probably in that kind of a step analysis of understanding what needed to be done, how we did it, and then sort of that results piece. Just one last thing in the interview, we'll ask sometimes a simple question, but the interviewee that responds and provides a bit more and actually goes, yeah, this is how I acted in that situation, but then adds, and here's the result, here's what I learned from that, adds a little bit to the answer rather than just, okay, I answered the question, but give us a little bit more of your understanding of that situation. So positive in interview.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say at Dialog, it depends. So, if we've had that kind of coffee interview, a lot of times I get CVs and packages directly to me or other people through our organization. There's lots of planners, so don't just think, oh, I have to go to the partner at Dialog, reach out to the associates or other people you know. If it's a formal posting, it will go through our people and culture manager, and anything that I do get, I do send to people in culture. And we have a kind of a more team-oriented approach to how we do it, but at the end of the day, someone is screening those cover letters, and that's where typos, ChatGPT, all mean it's not going to come back to me ultimately for that decision if we're going to have an interview or not. One of the things I would encourage you in your cover letter, there was a question related to experience outside of Canada, and absolutely, but whatever is in that cover letter, you need to highlight why you're sharing that. Why is it relevant? That tailoring, we've talked about this from a different perspective a few times. That tailoring to the job is really important, and I think it'll be a huge differentiator. It may be really important that you have a passionate understanding of the northern climates if you're applying for David, but if you're applying to Dialog, I might want to hear more about the fact that you volunteered to attend the pop-up for the OCP update in your community. So take that time to put that extra kind of personality and personalization in your cover letter, and that again will increase the chance that it will get out of sort of that HR screening portal. And so the same goes with previous experience, either internationally or if planning is your second career. There were a couple of questions in the chat about sort of being a mature student and coming at this as a second time around. Let us know why your experience from your previous life may or may not be relevant to what we're doing. We just hired someone at Dialog who came from a communications background and spent 15 years working as a communications consultant and then went back to planning school. And so that was really interesting and valuable to us because we do so much engagement work. So being able to kind of weave those stories and let us know who you are, but why who you are will be relevant to our team is a way to make sure that you're standing out.
I'll just add on that.
Yeah,
I'll
go
just
ahead,
add
Emily.
one thing on that. So I actually, for my postings, I actually get all of them. So we have an HR software that gives out like a percentage ranking of how well you meet the qualifications, but everything comes up for me. So it's, I guess the short answer there is it depends on the company or the city or whoever you're applying to.
It's great. Just to finish off your question there, Jordan, the HR people are going to look through your CV. So this is why tailoring your CV so it looks like it closely matches as much as possible the job description, because nobody's ever perfectly matches. So everyone's just tweaking them again within being truthful and with integrity. And then your cover letter is what there's kind of two pile A's. You want to get to the pile A with HR, that's your CV. The pile A with your actual probably future boss or team member, that's going to be your cover letter and how that gets through it. Let's just pick up on the.
Can I just throw one more thing in on this? So sometimes the HR folks, they're not subject matter experts, right? Especially with the municipalities where they need to hire for engineering, for the pet control, for bylaw, so you don't need to come off as the world's smartest person. It should be in plain English. You should be able to explain how you're meeting these requirements in plain English. Otherwise it may unfortunately go over their head because it's just too technical or it's at a level of detail that's not required for it. So think about who's that first gatekeeper that's going to get your resume, and they ultimately make the decision whether it goes to the hiring manager or not in a lot of cases. So
please actually just be careful on planning jargon. It's like, I think planning is really a jargon heavy profession, and so much of the work we need to walk that back to make it accessible to the community. So don't start your career off not leaning into planning jargon.
It's a complete, the jargon's a complete ruse, folks. There's nothing complex about this. A complex word is just a complex word. It's all simple. Yeah. Emily?
Oh, I was just going to say on the kind of jargon and the acronyms, I was just looking at the question about employers consider experience gained from outside Canada, and Jill kind of talked about this. And yeah, absolutely, we like that. But I sometimes find it hard to decipher some of the acronyms. So I find when there's a lot of acronyms that I'm not familiar with, it's the experience is almost lost on me. I don't understand kind of what this is. So that's something I'd be mindful of.
Yeah. Trying to impress folks with acronyms and big things like that, it just turns them off. Every time. You'll learn that all the time from the microphone for the rest of your career. Starts now. David?
Just touching on the experience gained outside Canada, I think the key for me when we see that on a resume or a student or someone applying even from overseas is not just experience, but tying that to what we do. And if you have experience, not just listing the experience as far as employed with this firm or this municipality, whether it's in Europe or in India or wherever, but the skills you exercised in that job, that will transfer to my job description. So it's often tough. You'll see resumes with experience in these places, but it doesn't really tell you much because planning in those foreign countries is a lot different than planning in northern BC or even in BC in general. So how you can say, and I think Jill, you touched on how strong community engagement, relational skills are in planning, whether it's municipal or with a company like Dialog that does a lot of that day to day in all their projects. But we deal with the public day to day here. And if you can show that you had not just a job in this role in a foreign setting, but that job, here's the skills you exercise daily that will transfer to the job I'm applying for. Because often it's a disconnect. We'll see that and we'll go experience, but we don't really know whether that means anything because the context might be drastically different. So you need to communicate why that experience adds to what you're bringing to this position.
Thanks, David. That's great. Let's pick up with Rob here. Rob, first off, thanks for raising the issue of an older students. And secondly, congratulations. And, every person here has got serious respect for you and the courage and the commitment to planning it takes to go back and do a planning degree mid-career. That is one very serious piece of commitment. So well done. You're looking to work in the North. Yeah, mature students, great question. Bring a lot of life experience. Mature students in my classes are probably my favorite students because they have stories to tell. They understand things so much more deeply than than all of us when we were younger. So over to the panel, thoughts on how to position yourself as a mature student. You've got half a career behind you. You may be a parent, and God knows that prepares you for just about anything in the world. What are your thoughts?
Share all that with us. If that previous career, it's going to add value and experience. So tell us why. As I mentioned, that communications professional that's joined us as a new planner, that life experience is really valid. And if you're a parent, my goodness, you know how to design an inclusive city. You're thinking about age-friendly design. The regulations around school zones. If you're thinking about zoning, like there's so many applications for that. And so we really value that life experience and feel free to tell us about it in your application. And, if you don't have the time to go to the networking activities, again, because it all happens in the evening, we get that. I think just do the cold call approach and try to make those contacts within the hours and the capacity that you have.
I'll just made a note there on Rob, like from the North. If you're looking for a job in the North and you've got experience in the North, that's a good title because hiring folks from the South, urban areas with no experience, having lived and grown up and worked in a lot of small communities, it's a different world. Your sense of common sense, the ability to explain things without, just there's a common sense quality, and that is worth its weight in gold when you're getting started. David, Emily?
Yeah, just follow a little bit on what Jill was saying. I think that experience you have from other career, just other life experience is valuable. You deal with some challenging people. When you work in a local government, you deal with people that don't like being told what the zoning bylaw regulation says. And like Jeremy said, sometimes it needs to be reconsidered. We have all kinds of processes to make good projects happen with development variance permits and you name it. But you'll deal with difficult people. And if you've got life experience and you can manage that and you can show that you can handle talking with people in difficult situations, whether they're planning, we interview people and we ask for those situations. How did you handle a difficult situation with a coworker? And that might be when you worked in a mechanic shop 5 years ago, or you did whatever the job is. And it's not the job and that part of the experience. It's what was the situation? How did you resolve it? How did you move through it? And how you communicate that to us so that we can see that you've got a real, wealth of experience in dealing with situations and you can handle them well. I think life experience is really valuable, but how you relate it to the job. And if you bring another career that brings a different perspective that has real value, like the communications experience that Jill talked about, those things are all really positive.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. And I just wanted to touch on the kids piece here. I think, don't forget that the people, I have a toddler at home. I have another one on the way. My colleagues have toddlers. My boss has 3 school-age children. So it's, we get it. And I think just reaching out and that cold call approach that Jill mentioned, like, and the hiring manager or anyone else, if you see a job and you're like, I think that's a cool job, reach out to the person. Chances are they've had help in the past. Jeremy was saying that. And, I'll do a coffee, I'll do a call, I'll do whatever works with your schedule. So I think there's some understanding there for sure.
Sorry, Mark. There's no invaluable whatever you've done in the past contributes to where you are now. So if it's been 10 years in landscaping, that's great. I want to hear about it, and I want to hear about the problems that you addressed in landscaping or at McDonald's, whatever. It's all relevant in some way. So don't be afraid to show those connections, as folks have mentioned so far, because we'll consider them. They're valid.
When you're picking up on that, when you're thinking about the kind of skills that jobs need, we naturally gravitate to, I know how to do zoning. It's like, okay, yeah, but realistically, most of your life is spent in project management, working in teams, being responsible, being able to write, being able to speak, common sense, all those sorts of things really are often the drivers between success and are really good team members. And, working on a farm, doing landscaping, something that has apparently nothing to do with planning, way more crossovers than you might think. And Herman, with respect to timing, if the kids are in bed, you've got 15 minutes a day, get online. If you can't be volunteering and participating in boards and meetings and running things like that, get online, build that network of people, start reaching out to them, start sharing information, basically start your job interview informally with a handful of people at night at 9 p.m. because they may well be answering you live because of their kids as well. So yeah, there's lots of ways to connect, and it's really about building a relationship and connecting on that. Let's see here. A few other thoughts. Additional courses. Liam's checking out. If you're doing your undergrad, you've got quite a tranche of you've got 3-4 years of probably 8 to 10 courses a year. You're going to be busy. It's pretty crazy stuff. If you're doing your graduate program, it's probably 2 years most of the time, with or without some big thesis major project waiting for you at the end that may drag on for a semester or two. This is. A lot of those are not based on practical skills, though. It's the thing that happens in universities. They claim they're going to teach you how to think, not how to do anything. For some reason, they haven't gotten their heads around that by far the most complicated things to think about are the real things in life. And you could teach people how to think by teaching them how to do real things. But the deal is that most universities are not set up that way. Most professors, it's so hard to be a professor that they can't take time out to practice. And they're actually maybe not so inclined. They really are intellectuals at heart. And so as students, you end up having to leap across that bridge, which is quite a challenge. In terms of additional courses, over to you, panel. What are your thoughts?
So in my line, I would say UBC has this land economics program that is really, really good. I signed up for it and dropped it because I was also trying to do my master's and in planning and working full time at the time. But I know a lot of people in my industry who have done it and they've gotten a ton out of it. It's very technical, but you'll come out of that with a ton of skills that you might have needed a year or two to pick up on the job. So you're already that much further ahead, and that's a big commitment. So I know ULI and UDI do kind of workshops on development and on planning. Mark teaches the UDI one, I'm pretty sure, are used to anyways, and he'll help you understand what goes into a real estate development project from pro forma and site planning onwards. And I think that is something that you should do whether you're in municipal or private sectors, to understand the pro forma. I think it was mentioned somewhere in the chat, but understanding the economics of development is so important to see how all those levers work and how policies actually impact the feasibility, and the built form of development is just so important. And I think that planners have gotten a lot better at that in the last handful of years because of the economic conditions. They're more attuned to that, but not everyone is, and not everyone focuses on it. So yeah, pick those skills up. That's important.
A few more on that one, Liam. UDI offers an entire course on essentially real estate development. SFU has the city program, which is heavily used by professionals, mostly in the Lower Mainland, because a lot of it's in person, but that's the Royal Roads has a whole connection of essentially digital, if you want more formal, those sorts of things. Every one of the professional organizations is constantly offering webinars, law, plant PIBC, CIP, AI, the architects, the biologists, the engineers, landscape, they're all out there offering educational opportunities. Senior governments, they're offering webinars on their, like, approvals from senior governments can be some of the slowest things right now in any of our worlds. They're often offering webinars and explanations of how those things go. And then there's the online courses. I mean, you can gather a pile of online courses for free from almost every major university in the world now, especially the Ivy League universities and other maybe less accredited ones. But, training, certificate, program, it's all valuable.
Yeah, you touched, Mark, on several that I was thinking of, and I'm not sure, webinars aren't a course, but and maybe they don't belong in a CV or a resume, but they are good things to bring up in either cover letters or in an interview itself when there's a topic that you can say, I participated in a CIP webinar on planning, Indigenous planning, whatever the situation or scenario might be. So you can bring that in as experience and knowledge. I'm going to put in a plug for LGMA, the MADI and the PADM programs. If you're looking at municipal, local government planning, there's a lot of role that you play as a planner as part of a city team. You're not just a planner. And especially, again, some of these opportunities in a smaller place. As you're looking for advancement in your career, I'm involved in budgeting and project management across all of our departments at the city. And you need to understand what municipal finance means and what Parks, Rec, and Culture or Parks departments, priorities or realities are. So there's lots of training out there in different ways. Understand courses cost money. Some of them are challenges, but there's lots that are short. They're 1 day or they're half day online virtual programs. So lots of different ways to add to your CV with those kinds of things as you maybe not right at the start, but as you go through your career.
Or I'll just add one last thing. Or topic specific courses are always helpful too. Like, for example, we have a large agricultural portfolio and a heritage portfolio here at Delta that is not admittedly my strong suit, but we have an agricultural planner who's like, I've done this training. And so if you have an interest area like that often that's in the future.
Really great point. Just a comment on this one then, folks, you're going to be learning forever. Because the idea that you get out of school and that is, I'm not sure it ever applied, but it sure doesn't apply today, where just personally speaking, I have over 100 university level courses that I have ordered in. They are on my CD player in my truck all the time. I'm in my truck. I'm always listening to some university course explaining some more complex things. Okay, I'm a bit of a geek and a part-time academic, but that's kind of the level it is. You're constantly upskilling and this first job you get is your first job. You're going to have 20 of them over your career, and you're going to be moving and competing and evolving, and you need to constantly be upskilling, credentializing, and keeping that thing moving. Questions here. We got a couple from Sidra and Tabitha that are very similar. Sidra's based in Calgary, looking for a job in BC, and Tabitha is noting that there's a lot of jobs out there that are not posted. So any further suggestions on how to excavate, make connections, and find jobs that may not be immediately, easily accessed, or somebody that knows somebody or something like that, or maybe that is the way. Thoughts on excavating the opportunities when they're not immediately visible or in another jurisdiction entirely?
I'm not sure if David was going to go. I would say in the public sector, looking at this question more, there are rules from the union around postings, and often we will have to post internally before it goes external. And if there's a qualified internal candidate, that person may have priority. So there's not really a way to access some postings if they're only internal. But for us, at least, I think this is the case with most municipalities. David, chime in if I'm off, but if there's a job, it gets posted. We don't take kind of resumes. I mean, you can submit them, but they don't often get matched that way.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty standard local government, internal versus external. Sometimes we'll put them about at the same time. That's usually when we don't think there's anyone internal qualified. But yeah, sometimes we'll do the internal intentionally first because we know there's some municipal employees already working with us that are ready for that job, hoping they'll apply or knowing they might. Yeah, I was just going to say, I had a dead LinkedIn account for about the past 5-6 years until still on the PIBC board, was down, and probably Herman, you and SFU UBC held a great social back in the fall when PIBC board was in Vancouver, and 2 or 3 students asked me if I was on LinkedIn, and I said, yeah, but I don't remember my password, and it's definitely not an up-to-date profile. It's up to date now, and it's actually surprised me how active that site or that platform is again. And if Jill now, Emily, myself, if you're interested and you reach out to us that way, we'll respond. We might just tell you, great to hear from you. We might not have any opportunities, but I think that does look like it's a great way to network. And I guess, again, back to that, if your personal situation means physically getting out to a lot of things daily and evenings might be a challenge, but that does seem to be a good platform again, that's really in use in a way I hadn't considered until a few months ago.
Yeah, thanks to Elon Musk and some recent his last year of antics. LinkedIn, I was last night scrolling LinkedIn. Well, it's starting to look a lot like Twitter now used to look. There's a lot of people, or a lot of us having conversations on LinkedIn now that never used to be there. So yeah, LinkedIn's definitely the leading platform for following, connecting with folks in the professional arena all across us. It's quite interesting. Certainly a good chance, and there's enough information about them to get you immediately started if you want to reach out to them, separately. You don't even necessarily have to do the connect on LinkedIn. You know their name, you know where they work. That's pretty evident. You can just go dig them up, dig up their email, probably off the website of wherever they work, and start reaching out to them directly that way. Question about technical skills. We're getting close to our end. So obviously when people first start their jobs, we need them to have some basic technical skills, in part because some of us older folks don't, at least the new programs. But AutoCAD is quite certainly if you're working in Jill's world where there's a lot of design work going on, AutoCAD helps. GIS, I'll just say there, if you're going to be a GIS technician, you are a GIS technician. What you need to know is what GIS can do for you more than being able to do it yourself. But if you have the skill, especially for a small community, wow, is that ever amazing? But InDesign, the Adobe suite, a few of those are basic. What are you looking for in your early, more junior hires for some basic technical skills?
I mean, I put it in the chat, but I think for us, Adobe, you don't need to know them all, but InDesign would be great. It's a great chance to learn it, to put your portfolio together, and it's something we use all the time at the end of the day, reports, public engagement material, it's all going out in InDesign. Some people use Canva. I'd encourage you to skip over Canva and go right to InDesign. And generally, Adobe gets a lot of flack, and it is kind of a Ponzi scheme in terms of the software cost. But I think as you're a student, you have access to a student license, hopefully for free from your institution or at a really reasonable price. Get that license and learn it while you're still in school, so you have access to it when it's affordable. So you're not trying to do it when you're not a student anymore, and then it's a lot harder to be able to afford that license cost.
Basic proficiency with Excel is super important, and you will learn a lot of it on the job. But if you can, provide examples of, particularly, like I know in Mark's program at VIU, we had to do quite a bit of pro forma work. If you can go back and actually learn something in those courses, then that's going to help you a lot in the private sector. Same with Microsoft Project, building schedules. These sorts of things are very helpful in my line of work.
And I think some of those, technical skills are useful. We have a GIS department. If we're hiring, like Mark said, if we're hiring a GIS tech, we'll hire a GIS tech. But if you come with some knowledge and understanding, and again, I think what Mark was alluding to is GIS is not the AutoCAD, the technical side of it. It's what can you do in a real and a comprehensive GIS? How can you bring something on the planning side that might help our techs build us a better system that can provide better service to other staff in the city or the public as far as access to information. So that's valuable. I think the basics, we need people that are proficient in Microsoft Word, Excel, some of those things. But we need you to show us that you can write. I think that goes back to some of those comments about don't use ChatGPT to write your cover letter. Write your cover letter. It's not a 10-page cover letter. It's probably 1 to 1.5 pages, maybe 2 at the most. But write it yourself so that we can see that you can write. And if we find lots of typos and errors in it, that's a challenge. People talked about international experience. We'll acknowledge first English might not be a first language. We have grace in that area, but we want to see that you made a good effort to bring yourself forward and not have AI try and present you in a way that might not be realistic.
AI is a big piece of our future, folks, but at the present, it's a challenge. We spent some time, we actually had rigs work for us for a bit to try and see could we automate some of our work. Nope. Very difficult. Our junior person before, while she was still with us, we don't have one right now, but we tried. And in the end, it messes with your head. It tries to think for you, and then you spend more time trying to sort it out. And your head doesn't get into it. And our world is your head has to be into it. It's a thinking profession, and GPT just can't replace that. So we're actually suspending a lot of use. We use it for research. We use it for brainstorming and scoping ideas and things like that, but almost never are we putting any content straight out of it into an application. Or any of that kind of communication is just not working. We're basically out of time, folks, but we'll go one last question for maybe the little more experienced ones, and I'll pose this question as opposed to what's in there now, is when can I start my planning consultancy? So if you're more mature and you've got your head around some of the basics of experience, you can kind of put your shingle out there. I started mine after about 3 years of experience, and I was way too soon. I survived, didn't go down, but it was some close calls on some things that just really was not prepared for. So you do need some good experience. So because folks are going to pay you by the hour. If you want to start a consultancy, you pretty much can't bill more than 1,000 hours a year, and that'll be working 25. There's about 2,000 hours in a regular job in a year. If you start a consultancy and you're working less than 3,000 hours a year, you're probably not going to make it. You'll work 3, you'll bill 1,000 hours. So whatever you're charging per hour, that's what you're going to make gross. All costs come out after that. It's a tough business to get into. If there is a niche and your expertise will work, or you're in an area where they need, lots of folks to do that, that's great, but you're going to need experience because they're not going to pay you to learn. So, if you're an entrepreneurial, my whole career spent most of it working for myself because I'd started my first businesses when I was a teenager. To curse but it is what it is. If you're inclined that way, then focus on getting your head around a lot of really key things very quickly so that you can do them without supervision and you can do them as well or better than most other people. And then credentials, you're going to have to credential way up because you're going to be in a competitive environment with everybody else. And big firms like Jill's, I won't even bid against Jill's firm. My firm, they have an entire proposal machine. They eat me for lunch every day. So, I just don't even bother bidding for things like that. So, you'll need to have a little niche or get working for a big firm, and then later you can go out on your own. So even if it's hard getting a job, keep grinding away because you're going to need to see the experience from inside to be able to do it. Final comments from anyone on the panel here before we let everybody go, including yourselves. Any other thoughts you'd like to offer?
Don't get discouraged. You guys look at it there. It took me forever to crack the municipal world from the private sector even. So, yeah, just keep trying and reach out to people, be friendly. I don't think we're scary.
Yeah, it's a numbers game. So just keep every day, and like Mark said, looking for a job is a full-time job. So make sure you're committed, and you might have a terrible cover letter. Don't send it. Spend the extra night and just rewrite it and make sure every one of them is worth it, because it's the difference between you getting the job and not.
Yeah, keep working at it and broaden your window of where, but also if you're comfortable in one location where you happen to have studied or be living, do your homework when you look at maybe potential relocation. Because when we look for people hiring in the north, we're looking for people coming from far away. We want to get a sense of where they're coming and coming here because they want to, and they're going to be with us for hopefully more than a year. They're going to be with us for a while. So yeah, don't limit yourself because of geography, but also do your homework when you're looking at different opportunities. And I think the cold calls, the pre-calls, don't hesitate to call if you see a job at the city of Terrace. I'm sure Emily, Jeremy, if call, try and reach out, and if you have questions, do your own little pre-interview, and we'd be happy to chat with people and give some insight on what we're looking for and why we're hiring.
Great. Thank you all. Jeremy, Emily, David, this was very generous, an hour and a half out of your day. I don't want to see your calendar and all the to-do lists and how we've messed up your work plan. Thank you so much. This was very generous of you to give to our next generation and kind of give them a sense of what this bridge window looks like as they get started in their career and these early years. Very, very grateful. Thank you all for joining.